We thank God for the blood. We thank God for his sacrifice. We thank God for his life-giving willingness. And here we are at the seventh word as the blood is dripping down. It was now about the sixth hour, and darkness came over the whole land until the ninth hour. We're in the 23rd chapter of Luke. For the sun stopped shining, and the curtain of the temple was torn into two. Jesus called out with a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." For the rest of our time together, I want to consider the topic pushing to commitment. Pushing to commitment. While we take this time every year to acknowledge the deity of Christ, we consider his propitiation, his payment for us to bridge the gap between death and life, sin and righteousness, through the sacrifice made over 2,000 years ago. And in these considerations, lest we forget that Jesus, in his being fully divine, he was also fully human. Jesus, in him being 100% God, was 100% man. Jesus, in him being 100% immortal, was 100% mortal. On this Good Friday, we remember the full-blooded Jewish male who was willing to give all he had to save the mere mortal. Through the preaching of my colleagues, we see Jesus doing this in three levels. We see first, he assessed the pain of the natural. And first, he assessed the pain of the natural. In statement one, he issued a statement of forgiveness. He said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do." In his statement of forgiveness, he was willing to acknowledge the turmoil that his body had just been put through. In statement number 5, he said, "I am thirsty," a word of distress as he deals with the physical need of his dehydration. He was assessing the pain of the natural. Jesus knew at that very moment that if he was going to be able to get to the end, he had to be real about where his body was right now. He had to be real with that his body was wrecked with pain. He had to be real that the splinters were digging into his back. He had to be real that his lungs were beginning to give out. He had to be real that he was dehydrated, and that even though it was dark, it might have still been hot outside. He had to be real that he had already been whipped 39 times. He had to be real that the thorns were digging into his head. He had to be real about assessing the pain of the natural. But while he was pushing to commitment, not only did he have to be real about assessing the pain of the natural, he had to be real about acknowledging the torment of the temporal. He had to be real about acknowledging the torment of the temporal, the torment that was going on in his soul, the torment that was going on in his mind, will, and emotions. In statement number 2, he deals with what's going on in his mind, will, and emotions. He says, "Truly I say to you, to the thief on the right, today you will be with me in paradise." He speaks a word of salvation because even then he realizes that it is not his will that any man should perish. And so he has to deal with this temporal space of torment. In statement number 3, he sees his mother crying, and he sees John weeping, and he speaks a word of relationship to deal with his soulish need and his emotions, and he mends that breach that is being caused by his death. In statement number 4, he acknowledges the torment of his temporal by calling out to his father, "Why have you forsaken me?" He acknowledges this abandoned feeling and deals with the emotional need to be reconnected to the father that he's been sent from. In statement number 6, he acknowledges the torment of his temporal when he says, "It is finished." A word of reunion. He makes sense of it in his mind, of all the pain he just put his body through, of coming from down through 42 burning generations. It is finished. Through walking on the earth, it is finished. Through Jerusalem and Galilee, through miracles recorded and unrecorded, it is finished. He deals with the acknowledgement of the turmoil of the temporal. But when Jesus completed accessing the pain of the natural and acknowledging the torment of the temporal. After he got through dealing with what was going on physically and being honest about what was going on emotionally, God interrupted the divine natural order of time and space to get his attention. And as darkness blanketed the whole earth at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and the curtain of the temple, the veil was separated, that separated mortal from immortal, was torn into two. Jesus cries out, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. After he has pushed past the flesh and he's pushed past his emotions, he acquiesces to push towards the eternal. There's nothing left. God, there is nothing left for me to do. Into your hands I commit my spirit. I've done all the miracles you told me to do. I healed all the people you told me to heal. Into your hands I commit my spirit. I forgave them for beating me. I forgave them for putting me on this cross. Into your hands I commit my spirit. I acknowledged my mother. I gave her to somebody who take care of her. Into your hands I commit my spirit. It is finished. Into your hands I commit my spirit. Jesus knew in the omniscience of his deity that he couldn't stop at assessing the natural or quit at acknowledging the temporal. But in order for lives to be saved, he had to acquiesce, to push to the eternal. It was in his acquiescence that the centurion soldier finally repented and said, truly, this is the Son of God. It was in his acquiescence that the earth began to shake. It was in his acquiescence that his head hung and he died there on the cross. It was like Jesus saying, I have given my all, and Lord, finally I'm available to you. We sing we're available to you, but we're in denial about the physical. We don't want to look at what we're struggling with. We don't want to be real about our bodies racked with pain. We don't want to be real about the addiction messing with us. We don't want to be real about our hormones tormenting us. But Father says, if you're going to push to commitment, you have to be real about your flesh. Jesus says, my storage is empty, and Lord, I'm available to you, because he had dealt with his emotions. He wasn't taking all that stuff carrying around. He had already left them there, Pastor Mathis. He knew he couldn't go on until he had forgiven them. He dealt with his emotions, and in his availability, God was glorified. His kingdom was edified. For all eternity, hell was horrified. When we acquiesce to the plan of God for our lives, when we push to commitment, when we tell the devil he's a liar, when we tell those in our way, you can't stop me, when we tell our bodies, you can't block me, when we tell our job, you may be my source, but you're not my resource. When we put folk out our house that ain't acting right, when we refuse to allow our physical to get away of our commitment to pushing onward, we acquiesce to commitment. Real commitment breeds love. Real commitment breeds agape love. We forget about the natural. We ignore the temporal. And we acquiesce into love, because that's love. GMA put it this way. Jesus went to Calvary to save a wretch like you and me. That's love. They hung him high. They stretched him wide. He hung his head. For me, he died. That's love. That's not how the story ends. But. We'll see y'all on Sunday. Have a good night.